Good day. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the process that I use to make balsa wood poppers for use with fly fishing. This is a multi-step process because I usually build quite a few of them at one time, anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen at a time. So I have it broken up into multiple steps that I accomplish to expedite the production process. First step is to cut the basic balsa to the rough shape and size. The second step is to build the recess to hold the hook and to mount the device that I use to turn it with. I use a lathe to turn it with, so I have to mount it on a mandrel so that I can turn it. And the next step is the actual turning or shaping of the balsa into the actual popper. And there's 2 steps in this process. The first is to shape the outer side, and then the second step is to shape the face, to put a little bit of an indent in there so that it makes that gurgling sound as you pull it through the water. The next step is to glue the hook in place, and once that's done, then we can start. We're pretty much done with the basic construction of the popper. It's complete as of this time. Just have to cut off that rod that we inserted to the balsa wood. Then we can paint it, and that's where your creativity comes into play, because you can choose any color under the sun. I mean, I've painted them in oranges and reds and whites and blacks and greens, and I put designs on them and everything else. You can make them look like frogs. You can make them look like minnows. You know, it is purely up to you. Whatever you think might work to catch fish is what you can do. The next step is to apply epoxy over the top of it. That seals it and makes them waterproof. It also gives them a little bit of a shine. In that step, I use just standard old 5-minute epoxy I get at Home Depot or any other of the big box stores. The last step is when we actually get into the fly tying part of it. That's to put, if you want to, you don't have to. You can leave it done at that time. You've got a popper that'll work. If not, you can add hackle to the base of it, to the back end of it, to put a collar on. You can add a tail to it. You can add legs to it, and I will demonstrate some of those things in the process of building this. So, with that all said and done, let's take a look at the materials and the tools that we are going to need to actually build this popper. Okay. First, the raw materials that we're going to use. This is just a simple 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch piece of balsa. It's about 36 inch long. You can get this at any hobby shop. I bought this one at a place called Hobby Town, which is just up the road from me, not too far. But you can also get them at Hobby Lobby, and any of your craft stores should carry 1/2 inch balsa. That's the only raw materials you're going to need, except for what you would normally use for tying flies, hackle and feathers and things like that. You're also going to need some the paints, obviously, and this is the paint that I use. Right there. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but that's it's called Apple Barrel, and it comes in all different colors. Let's see if I can get that up a little closer. Here you go. How's that? And I like it because it's relatively inexpensive, and it's acrylic, means it's water-based, so it's easy to clean. And I'll talk about some of the other advantages of using acrylic here in just a minute. And I've got quite a few different colors that I use, so we'll talk about that when we get to the color part. The other thing I use is this object right here. That is a hobby miter box, and you can buy these in a lot of different places, including Hobby Lobby. This, move these over here. This is the saw that I use to cut them with, and this fits right in there just like that. Okay, and you can see how that works. So just like a standard miter box. that over here. And here's my, you can see about that at Hobbytown. That's Insecure, and that's a gap filling super glue. I use that on the hooks. When I set the hook in, I use that to hold the hook into the popper itself. The dikes, I use that to cut the mandrel off when I'm done turning the fly, or the popper. I use the saw to cut the initial recess to hold the hook, but then when I get down to the final process, I don't know, you can't see that too well, but this is a jeweler's file that I bought years and years and years ago. It has a blade like a knife, so one edge is sharp and the other edge is not. It's kind of like the back of a knife. This lets me widen the recess so I can so it'll take the hook. You'll see that in a minute. I also use in the turning process those are just plain old tongue depressors that I glued some sandpaper to, and you can see I've got 3 different grits that I use primarily. I've actually got a couple of others. I got an 80 grit that I use too, but this is 220, 240, and 500. Okay. And I've got a Dremel tool, and this has mounted on it, I don't know if you can see that, that's a rotary rasp, kind of a teardrop shaped rotary rasp, and that's what I use to form the face of the popper to give me a nice round cut look. Here's the heart of the whole thing right here. This is my lathe. Just turn that a little bit for you so you can see it a little better. There you go. Now let me zoom that in. There we go. Okay. Okay. You can see here, this is a Jacobs chuck mounted to a little 12-volt motor. I bought this whole thing on Amazon.com. I think I paid $10 for the whole kit and caboodle. And it came with a chuck key and all the stuff you need to make it work. And this is my rod. This is my lathe. This is what I use to turn them with. I've also built this. Oh, can't see that. Just a second. Back it. I'll zoom out a little bit. There we go. This right here. Okay, this is a little speed controller. Just go like this. And nothing special here. This is a speed controller I bought off of, I think it was eBay. And I've wired it up so I can, this is my speed control, my on-off switch, and this is forward and reverse switch. So, but you don't need to do all the wiring. You can just use the motor controller by itself. It comes with the speed control unit, and you can see here it's fairly simple. You've got 2 connections for the power and 2 connections for the motor, and that's all there is to it. I like this setup because I can run it off of a 12-volt power supply, which I pick up at scrap yards and places like that, at Goodwill. Or if you don't have access to 120, you can hook it up to a 12-volt or actually a 9-volt battery, and it'll work just fine. So you can actually do it remotely. We've also used toothpicks. I use these bamboo toothpicks. They're square. They're about maybe a little over just about 1/8 of an inch square. The regular round ones, the thin round ones I found don't work too well, so you need something that's fairly beefy for the mandrel, so that when you get ready to, you're starting to turn it, you're not over torquing it and breaking it off, which the thinner ones will do. And the last thing I use is sponge rubber, and I use that in the painting process. All that is a makeup brush. You can see here's what they just makeup sponges, all they are. You can see I've got a whole bunch of them in here. I think I bought this whole pack for $1.25. And then I cut them to different shapes that I can use then when and I'll show you how I use that when I'm actually applying the paint. And that's it. That's all the stuff that we need to actually build a popper. Now, some of this you might not have. If you don't, in fact, none of this is really necessary. You can actually build a popper with just a pocket knife if you wanted to. In fact, you can go on YouTube, and there's a lot of people that do that. I have found that doing it this way, since I like to build a lot of them at a time, it's much more, well, number one, it's a lot more fun because it's you get to turn some things and play with some tools. And number two, it's much faster. So, okay, that's it. The next step we'll do is we'll go ahead and cut. We'll do with the initial process, the initial step, and we'll get our balsa wood cut to shape. All right, here's my miter box. You can see I've got a little wedge mounted in here. That's about a 10-degree wedge. This little thing right here, the base of the miter box, the insert here is 1/4 inch hardboard and another piece of 1/4 inch hardboard cut to about 10 degrees. This allows me to cut all the face angles at exactly the same angle, and it increases or decreases the amount of time it takes me to get these things made. So, okay, just put this in here, and what I try to do is align the corner with this cut line right here, or get it close so I don't waste balsa wood. All right, I hold it good and tight and just start cutting. And there we go. And you can see I have a nice cut line there. Next thing I do is this is the top side, and I have a mark on this side of the vise right here. Now let's see this side right here, and you can't see it, but it looks just like this one here, and it tells me where to place the balsa for a 1/2 inch top. So that'll give me a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch balsa popper rough shape. And there we go. All nicely squared up. Now, whoops, as you can see here, let's change cameras for a minute. There we go. You can see that's a nice and square. Now, next thing I want to do, here's the tops. I need to turn it over on the bottom, and I need to run a saw curve right down the center of this thing, right through there. So I'll take my saw, and I want it to cut, I want the curve to go from basically right here, flush with the, let's see if you can see it, there we go. Flush with this bottom to about the center on the back. That way the hook is going to sit at an angle about like so, relative to the popper, which is what I want it to do. So let me just see if I can get this in the center. Okay, it's right about there, I think. That looks pretty close. Okay, and just start cutting. See, it doesn't take much because in this case we're cutting with the grain. can see, I'm a little over halfway on this side. And I just barely cut into the face over here. Okay, so now I've got that done. The next thing I need to do is grab my file. And use that file I was talking about to make this gap wider, so it'll make it a little easier to get the hook in. So my sharp side is in the groove, and now I just very gently file it down. Take your time here. There's no hurry on any of this. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay. There's the center, and you can see I'm right about at the center line. Hi. The next thing we have to do now is we have to insert our toothpick. So we've got a mandrel. So we've got a mandrel to turn it with. So once again, here's my toothpick. Let me get a little bit closer shot here so we can show you what this looks like. Okay. You can see there's the toothpick right there. You can see it's square, and it's about 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this right there, just about the center. Oop. So what I want to do now is I want to grab my awl, and I'm going to put a hole right in the middle. And I'm going to check it, make sure I'm aligned. So I'm going in nice and straight. That side, straight on that side. Okay. That looks pretty good. I don't want to go in too far. Alright, so now I've got a nice hole in the center. Now I'm going to grab some epoxy. Okay, so epoxy. Put some epoxy right down in there. Grab my toothpick. And insert it. Let me change cameras here so you can get a better view of what I'm doing. Okay? You can see that's, I want to check that now to make sure it's aligned pretty good. Check it both ways to make sure it's fairly well aligned. If I'm not careful with, at least a little bit careful, I'm going to wind up with some problems when I get ready to turn it. And there you go. That's the balsa wood ready for machining. The only thing I need to do is clip this off here and it's ready to go. Okay, as you can see, we got her all mounted up and ready to go. As I said, I'm going to be using several grades of sandpaper to be working this, 500, 240, but I'm going to start with this 80 grit paper. See if you can see that. Yeah, not too good. Let me go to a different camera. Okay, I'm going to start with this 80 grit paper. And what I'm doing on this first step is all I'm doing is just trying to get this thing to the shape, basically a cylindrical shape. Excuse me. Once I got that shape, then I will use the 240 to sand it down to something to final shape. So let's go ahead and start that off. Then the last step, I'll be drilling out the center line. Okay, one of the things I probably ought to talk to you about this is, you notice that I'm sanding from the bottom. That means I want this bit to be spinning into the sandpaper, like that. And that's why the reason I made this box really is so I could switch directions if I need to. You see there, I'm going clockwise, and now I'm going counterclockwise. I've also found that the higher speeds make sanding a little easier. And the one thing you don't want to do is put a lot of pressure on this while you're sanding, because that could shear off that mandrel, because it's only that 3/16 of an inch bamboo. So, all right. Let's check it. Okay, I'm still a little bit flat right here. Yep, still right here. There we go. Now I got a nice round cylinder. Okay, I'm going to do some basic shaping first. Just a little. What I'm trying to do is get a basic teardrop shape. There. Now I'm going to 240. A little finer grit. Okay, now I'm going to grab my 500 and do the final sanding with that. I'm going to sand the whole cylinder now. I'm not trying to shape it, I'm just trying to smooth it out. There we go. You see, there's your, let me go to a closer look. There's your, and somewhat of a, pretty much done. Okay, next thing I need to do is hollow out that center. Okay, I've moved the camera position a little bit to make this a little easier to see, but to hollow out that center, let me back off this a little bit, go to the far camera. I'm going to be using my Dremel tool with that teardropped rasp on it, and you can see both views now, the near and the far. So let's go ahead and start it spinning. Start the Dremel up. Now I'm going to put the Dremel right in the middle. I'm going to put it in, maybe a 1/16 or a 3/32 of an inch. Now I'm going to bring it over here to the side and start rounding it out, or start widening it out. And that's all there is to it. Now, one of the things you'll probably notice, and let me pull it out of here, because this bothered me for a while. I couldn't figure out why this was happening. And then I thought it was maybe something I had done in the mounting process, but it turns out it's not. Okay. Notice that there is this section on the bottom is thicker than on the top. I couldn't figure out why, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me. I'm closer here on the bottom. See this? So what happens is I'm drilling I'm going in like so. This piece of material up here hits the outer side faster than this down here. So that's just one of those things about doing it. Now, what you can do, if you want to, is you can grab the Dremel tool now and manually get rid of that little piece of, or widen it out just on the bottom. So, just like that. That's pretty good. That's pretty close. So, okay. There you go. Okay. 2 more steps to go to complete this. First thing we need to do is cut off this this mandrel right here. And the second thing we need to do is to take a look at this cut line down here on the bottom and make sure it's good enough for the to accept the hook. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to cut this up. I found the easiest way to do that is with a good sharp hobby knife. So I'm going to, and you notice I'm just kind of rolling it around. There we go. All I'm trying to do is just score it, and then I'll snap it. There we go. Now I'll just take this and trim it off like so. And now I'm going to go grab some sandpaper. I can use that 240, I guess will work. And now I'm just going to take this and sand it down. There we go. And that looks pretty good. You can't see that too well, it's out of focus, but there we go. Maybe just a little bit more. Camera's kind of backwards and upside down, so sorry about that. Okay, next thing I want to do is grab my saw and do that line again, the recess for the hook. There we go. Okay. Now, the last step is to insert the hook, and I'm going to use, let me bring you the box here just a second. You can see it's kind of backwards in every which way, so I'm using this hook right here. The HE, and that's actually a 1710. It says size 8, but it's actually a size 6. And all I'm going to do is just force this hook down in that slot. There we go. Okay. I'm going to go out to another camera. There. Now, we've got that mounted in there. I'm going to get my super glue. I'm just going to put a little bead down the center of it. Like that. And then just smooth it out. There we go. there's the balsa wood popper all done and ready to go. Okay, the first step I take in painting is to just cover it with some white, plain white acrylic. Here you go, just like this right here. This is just plain white, that apple barrel gloss acrylic. And the reason I do that is because I want it, since it's water-based, it'll pull the grain out of the popper. So the next thing I do is I grab my 500 grit paper. Again, just like that right there. And now I'm just going to slightly sand this down. You can see right here I've got some grain popped up here. I'll just sand that down. Sand out the bottom here. So I got something fairly smooth, and I've got a nice surface to paint to. And that looks pretty good. Okay. Yeah, it feels pretty smooth too. I can also take a small piece like this and just go over it. Sometimes doing it by hand is a little bit easier than doing it with the tool. There we go. I like to feel it. Yeah, that's pretty smooth. All right. So, now the next thing you have to do is figure out what you want to color it. The first thing I usually do is get some red on it. So I don't have any of the Cracker Barrel or Apple Barrel red. Oh, yeah. So I'll get some of this red here. This is called Real Red, and it's a gloss paint. And shake it up pretty good and just put a little dab on my palette. Okay. And now I'm going to paint the front of this a nice red. And it doesn't matter if I get a little over on the edges, it's because I'm going to be covering them up shortly anyhow. And there we go. So I now gotta, I'll take that out of the vise and show you what that looks like here. There you go. And you'll see I got the hook. The hook I painted a little bit too, and that's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. So let me put that back in the vise. Like so. Alright. Now, when I paint, I like to start at the bottom. And I invariably use white on the bottom. So let me put a little white on my palette here. By the way, the palette is nothing more than the plastic top of a coffee can is all I use. Okay. Just put some white on here. Now I'm going to put some, I don't know. Let me try some, I'm going to try some light green. This is Sublime Lime, it's called. So I'll put a little of that on. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to show you how I get a nice, I'm not going to put much. I want to start right about there. And I don't want a very big stripe here, so do that and come over on the other side and do the same thing. Now, make sure I get some here in the back. Now here's where the sponges come into play. I'm going to grab my sponge. Okay. So I got that. I'm going to cut it a little bit here so I got kind of a point. And now I'm just going to touch it to the paint. And you see what that's kind of doing there. It's kind of blending that into the white. So I get that line gets kind of obscured, so it blends in a little bit better. And I may need just a little bit more right here so I can do a little more blending. There we go. And you see that's on the bottom. I'm not worried about the top yet because I'm going to be doing something else on the top. So that kind of blends in pretty good. Let me just put a little right here. I don't want that to blend. I want that nice. There we go. Alright. Now, let's try some dark green. And this is, again, apple barrel. And this is mossy green. Okay. And same thing, I'll come up on the top. Now, there we go. And now I'll just come forward. Okay, and now we'll just feather that in as well. Okay. Do the same thing on this side. Okay, and there you go. There's a nice popper. Now, you can put another color on the top if you want, or different colors, but there you go. And that's pretty much all there is to it as far as painting. Now, one of the things you can do, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but I built these right here. Alright. That's just a 3/8 inch dowel that I inserted into or put a nail inside, and then I just ground the outside of that nail head down to for different size stamps kinds of things, if you will. And I've got them in all different sizes. So let me show you what you can do here now. Let's say you want to put some eyes on this. Alright, let's just don't know if this is going to work or not with this paint, but I'm just going to put it right there. That one. And then one right here. And there we go. There's an eye, or the beginnings of an eye. Now what I'll do is I'll let that dry really good. And the next thing I'll put in will be some red. And I'll go with a smaller size stamp and put some red in. And what I'll do is I'll move it just a little bit to the front so that the front of the two things match. I think I can show you that here. Okay, here's one that's done, and if you'll notice, I got 3 layers here. I got white, red, and black, and you see that the circles kind of progress forward. So I have a little more white here, a little more red here, and then the black. And that's probably what I would do with this one as well. See it on this side, the same thing. So that's how you do eyes. I suppose, I just dropped them. I suppose you could buy the commercial eyes, but that kind of defeats the whole idea of building it all yourself, I would think. At least to my way of thinking it would anyhow. So that's it. That's all there is to it. The next step that I will show is how we, once this all dries and I get it done, is how we go about putting on the epoxy. So that's about the last step before we actually dress it as a fly. Okay, well, the paint's all dry, and I didn't do anything else with the eyes, because I wanted to show you how I just get this on. So I just mixed up a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, and now we're just going to brush that on. The nice thing about epoxy is it is self-leveling, so it will attempt to finish off nice and smooth. You can see it's already running there. The problem with that, of course, is that if you get too much on or it isn't quite right, it's going to run and leave drips. So you have to be kind of careful. And what I have found is that I have to rotate it every few minutes after I get it on. And the thing you got to be careful of too is right in this area. Don't get up too close to that eye. The other thing about epoxy is that putting it on like this, that will also seal that hook in really well. Now I'm going to put a little on the front. Now I'm just going to let that set for a minute, and then I'll rotate it a little bit, and then let it sit for a few minutes more and rotate it, sit for a few minutes more and rotate it. You can actually build a drying device that rotates it for about 10 minutes or so that it takes for this stuff to set up and cure, but this is just as easy, I think. And it doesn't take long. That's why I use 5 minutes epoxy. That's it. The rest of it is just waiting on it to dry. So when we get done, we'll get to the last step and we'll put some hackle and tail on it, and then we're done. Okay, final step. I'm going to put a hair tail on this, and then some grizzly hackle. So I've got a piece of elk that I've had for a while. It was given to me by a taxidermist, and I got these scissors from a friend of mine who's a farrier, and he loves them because they're really heavy duty, and I've found that they are really super for cutting difficult to cut things like hair and different stuff. They are really good scissors and they're sharp. So let me cut a little bit of elk, and I'm not even going to stack it. I'm just going to put it on the, there we go, you can see that. Grab it right here, just cut it a little bit, and start some thread. These aren't the best scissors in the world for that, but I didn't get my others out. Alright, a little bit of a, there we go. And back to the back. Now, if you want to, you can embellish it with some crystal flash. In fact, I think I'll do that. Just gotta take some crystal flash and double it over and cut it, and double it and cut it. That should give me a that in. Yep, there we go. Pull that up a little bit, and I won't need. There we go. All right. Cut off the excess. Yeah, that looks okay. And now, just a little badger hackle, or grizzly hackle, excuse me. I bring this thread back. I'm going to tie from the back to the front on this hackle. Let me get my other scissors. There we go. Okay, got some hackle pliers here. Start wrapping it forward. turn will be sufficient. Over, behind, and in front. And now I'm just going to put a half hitch on it. 2. Okay. And there is a finished popper. Now, I didn't put the eyes in, but so hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, just drop me a comment in the comments section. That's it then. Tight lines, and have yourself a fine day.